Hey guys, I know it has been a minute since I have posted. This is actually the longest I have ever gone without posting. So I had a little bit of time off and I had a little bit of extra energy, so I decided to come in here and talk to you guys about like what's been going on with me. This is also going to be a couple months, like past months. I haven't been filming very much, but I still have been continuing to read in between lots of napping. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this one like I did the other one. I'm going to have wrap-ups and I'm going to be talking about what's been going on with me and kind of give you guys an update like from the last video that was posted. There will be timestamps in the description below, so if you decide that you don't want to listen to the update, you guys can actually bypass that and just go straight into the wrap-up. I'm going to go ahead and get into what's kind of been going on. So as far as my bunny has been doing, she's actually doing a little bit better. So that's actually a lot, really positive. And she's an old rabbit. She's 8 years old, so there's some things like that I think we're at a point like now where we just have to maintain and just hope for the best, like, and just keep her comfortable. Don't get me wrong, she's still a very happy rabbit. Her quality of life is perfectly fine. The vet, is very, hopeful, we're doing everything we can. We have, a few maintenance medications, that she's on. One of the maintenance medications is eye drops, the other one's an anti-inflammatory because they're worried that she's actually developing glaucoma, now in one of her eyes. But we're not really sure still because it's still really early. I know she's got early early stages of cataracts, but she's still able to get around just fine in her area, and she has absolutely no problem, doing everything that a normal animal would be able to do. She's very happy. She's aside from the fact that she's getting older and she's got a few little things, she's a very happy rabbit. In terms of my medical stuff that I've been dealing with, I tried for 3 months to get my iron up using supplements and changing my diet, and it didn't work. I had blood work done last month and there was a very ever so slight improvement, but it's not enough. So yesterday I met with a hematologist and I'm waiting for my insurance to approve me getting iron infusions. So it's going to be a situation where I'm going to be getting hooked up to an IV and they're going to be putting iron into my system. And I am very anxious about this because I have so many allergies, just so many different things, that I don't know how I'm going to respond to this. So they did recommend one, of course, that is supposed to be very good for people with allergies, but then we go into insurance coverage and in the US, it doesn't matter if you have insurance coverage or not, you're still going to experience a fairly large cost regardless of whether or not you have insurance, which is really kind of messed up, because if you have insurance, then it should be able to cover a lot. So I've got a little bit of anxiety, but anytime I deal with medical stuff, ever since I had all of my GI issues about 6 years ago, anytime I get into any situation where my health is compromised, I get very anxious about it because that time I was gaslit so many times by physicians who were not listening to me. And when you're dealing with stuff similar stuff once again, and you're back at this another area where you're continuing to have problems, and you once again meet another physician who's pretty much got a back-to-back schedule and doesn't really take time to talk to you and answer your questions and stuff like that, it's very triggering. So I mentally and emotionally have not been in a great place because I am very concerned. But it's not just the fact that I've been in an emotional state because of the medical issues. It's the fact that this is bringing back a lot of the memories of the stuff that I dealt with 6 years ago, and that has not been the easiest thing for me to deal with. So I've kind of been in kind of a mental funk on top of being extremely exhausted because anemia is extremely exhausting. And I have been finding myself I've been reading, but in between reading I've been napping a lot. So basically my entire existence for the last several months has been me coming home, having just enough energy to cook dinner, reading a little bit, and nodding off while I'm in the middle of my book. So needless to say, that things have been kind of, really hectic on that situation. So I do apologize about not being here more. I've missed filming so much, like I miss like making content, and I really hope that I'll be able to get back to it soon. Like I said, I'm still like waiting on the people like to let me know about the infusions, like what exactly they're going to cover regarding like those infusions. And then hopefully like after like I get the infusion, like I'll be able to get back on a more steady situation, like where I'm able to film more and create more content. It's just been a lot, and I've been tired like in the past, like when I was going through like my GI stuff like 6 years ago. I was exhausted, but it just seems like I get like a little bit of burst of energy like here and there, and it's literally just enough for me to get the bare minimum done. So that's kind of like what's been going on, and like where I'm kind of at like with everything. And anyway, I just wanted to come on here because like I still want to let you guys like know that I'm reading. I'm just not reading as much. And so I was able to do a wrap up for both February and March because I actually haven't been reading nearly as much as I typically do. Last year and the year before like that, I usually average around 12 books a month. In February, I only read 7 books, and in March I only read 5 books. So I really didn't read nearly as much as I typically do. So let's go ahead and get into the discussion of what I've been reading. So in February, one of the first things that I read is Luck's Consequences by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I read the first book towards the end of 2020. These are actually the collector's editions of the book. So the first book has the first 2 books in it. It's called Beginnings. This is the second book, Luck's Consequences, which has the 3rd and 4th book in it, and the last book has the last book in it plus the prequel to everything. And this is actually like really interesting. I actually got started on Jennifer L. Armentrout after I read From Blood and Ash at the beginning of last year, and I absolutely loved it. So I've been trying to explore more of like the paranormal romance kind of stuff like that Jennifer L. Armentrout writes, and I got some serious Twilight vibes from like this, but with aliens. So it was kind of funny because like the first book, Beginnings, was talking about how like vampires sparkle, and I knew that like this series actually came out after Twilight, but it's got like aliens and like, you know, forbidden romance, and it's really just an really interesting fun world. It's YA, and it's kind of got like a science fiction edge to it too. So I don't like want to get into too many spoilers like about this. I can say like that there is kind of like a hate to love sort of thing like right at the beginning of the series, which is really fun. I will say like too that if you guys enjoyed Twilight and you wanted more of a science fiction kind of, you know, twist on everything, this is actually a lot of fun. Especially like the first 2 books. Like I flew through those so fast. And things, of course, like, you know, like the series like evolves and changes and stuff like that. It becomes like a little bit more fanned out, and it's not like what you get like when you first start. So in these 2 books, like there's less high school angst, but it's still kind of like this is like more of expanding like the universe and kind of exploring like everything that's in the universe. And I actually ended up giving like a combination like of both of these books a 3.5 stars. Like I said, I really did enjoy it. I think like my biggest complaint like though was like that it was kind of like a little bit lagging for me. So like with most series, the reason like why this lagged like a little bit is because the 3rd book in this series, which was Opal, is all set up. And of course, like anytime you have a book that's the majority of the time all set up, it lags. Well, then you also have Origin, which that's like when the action like really started to pick up for me, and I rated Opal a 3-star, and I rated Origin, the 4th book in this series, a 4-star, so it ended up being a 3.5 stars. The next book that I read in February is Everybody Looking. This book was so amazing. There is a trigger warning though for rape, fat, and a fat-phobic comment. And it's basically like this entire story is told in verse. I love stories told in verse. Like this story was so raw. Everybody Looking is a story about Ada, who is getting ready to go to college, and she kind of like had a kind of a conflicting home life growing up. Her father is devoutly religious, and so like, you know, she was like not like allowed to do like a lot of things. She was very sheltered. And her mother, you know, like is no longer really a part of the scene anymore, but her mother is a very toxic person and has a lot of issues. So she's kind of like caught like in between like this area like where she's not allowed to be who she is. Her father has always emphasized how important it is for her to make money, but he never really taught her how to be happy. Dancing makes Ada so happy. She loves to dance, but she can't tell her father that because her father would know like this is not a path that will bring her money and stability. It will bring her happiness, but you know, he doesn't focus on happiness. He focuses on stability. This story is constantly oscillating between her present and things that happened to her when she was a kid, and you get to see glimpses of her growing up, things in her past that defined who she is now. You can tell like Ada has had some trauma though, because she is definitely a people pleaser, especially towards the beginning. The self-talk of the main character is extremely raw and full of weight of the things that you feel when you have to make people happy. This story was so honest and so emotionally engaging, and it was just so amazing. Overall, I really love this story. She just blooms into being this really independent person. The further we get into the story, she develops autonomy, and it's such a magical experience. I will say, like, at the very beginning of this, I had trouble connecting. This was not a book that hooked me from the beginning. I was intrigued by it, but like it wasn't something I had to sit down and read. But the further I got into it, the more I couldn't put it down. It was inspiring and raw, and I just really connected like with so many of the things like that were going on in here. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars because it was absolutely brilliant. I highly, highly, highly recommend it because it was just so good. The next book that I read is it's a manga, Light of the Ice. It's the 5th one in the series, and I absolutely love this series. Cheetos is this young girl, like she looks like a little girl, so she's treated like she's a little girl, but she has a really busy work schedule, and she ends up hanging out like with her childhood friend, Kokoro. And Kokoro is a professional figure skater. And so like this is kind of like one of those like really like cutesy like back and forth animes. I really just I love this series so much. This is another like one that I gave a 4 out of 5 stars because I love the progression of this. I love like the back and forth, the conflict, like, you know, the kind of like the angsty likeness of it, like how they never really know if the other person is kind of interested, and like they're never on the same page. So it's kind of like a really like zany like situation, but it's so good. I love it. So if you guys like are interested like in trying out manga, this is like a little gem. This whole series is a gem. And I'm still waiting for the 6th one to come out because they have not announced the translation for the 6th one yet, but I am anxiously awaiting, and hopefully it'll be soon. The next book that I read is Remote Control by Nnendi Okofor. This was a short story science fiction, and I notoriously have always struggled like with short stories because I never feel like short stories are long enough. The length of them is never enough. The world building is never enough. Now, with that being said, I did kind of feel that way about this, but I mean, I feel like that way about most novellas. So novellas like me, like it's kind of like a really big hit or miss. Like sometimes like I either have lukewarm feelings about them or I hate them. I actually did enjoy this. Being a short story, this was so good. It's like where Fatima is going from place to place because she has a real problem being near technology, and sometimes like technology kind of fizzles out around her. And being the fact that this is a futuristic situation, technology is everywhere. Like there's so many towns like that just really depend on technology. There's something that she lost like towards the beginning of the book that she was gifted, and she's looking for it, and she's really trying to reconnect with it and find it because she's trying to figure out like the mystery of her. This book is so hard for me to describe because this is like one of those books like that unless you've read it, for a novella there's a lot to it, and unless you've read it, it's really hard to kind of like describe it. So I'm trying to do the best that I can, and I'm hoping that I'm doing it at least some sort of justice. But Fatima, this story is extremely raw. Fatima is very like kind of like a loner, and she's been made to be a loner because of her circumstance. So you do see like somebody like that's, you know, not the fact that she doesn't want to connect with people. It's really hard for her to connect because she's never really accepted anywhere. A lot of people fear her, and a lot of people don't want to get close to her because of her abilities and what her coming to an area could mean for the residents there. I definitely like recommend like this, especially like if you're a fan of hers. I read Binti by her, and as far as like how this compares to Binti, like I don't know that I would consider like this having like the same kind of like fleshed outness I felt like with Binti, but it does still have like a really interesting storyline, and I still really enjoyed it, so I definitely gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in February is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. So this story I think was kind of a hit or miss for like a lot of people, because this was marketed as a sapphic romance book, and it is that, but it's actually a smaller portion of that book. You have Grace Porter, and she just got her doctorate, and she has, and to celebrate, her parents send her and some friends to Las Vegas for the night. Well, she ends up meeting like this beautiful Asian mystery girl, and they have this wonderful magical night. She ends up married, and she doesn't know her name or anything about her. So she wakes up the next morning, and this is like the first chapter, so this is definitely not spoilers or anything, but she wakes up in the first chapter with a card that kind of alludes to who this mystery girl is, but she knows that she really connected with her, and she could not get her out of her mind. The fact of it is like this story like kind of is trying to work out who Grace Porter is as a person. Grace Porter has spent her entire life doing what her father has wanted her to do. Her mother has been kind of like there, but like not really. Like her mother's more of a traveler, and her father's kind of like the, I guess you could say, like stable like one in the like between the parentage, because he is called Colonel. That's what she calls him, and it's a very strained relationship, and there's always been like a lot of emphasis on her ability to finish things and follow through. Now, she has a PhD in astronomy, and her father never wanted her to go with astronomy. Her father always wanted her to get a PhD in medicine, and that's not the path that she wanted to go. She wanted to make her own way, and now she's kind of like in the process of trying to find a job, and she's having a little bit of trouble, so there's like a lot of anxiety. And this is like really like, I felt like really like a coming of age story, and also like, you know, what it means like to, you know, have growing pains and trying to find your place in the world after you thought you established your place, and then you got out in the real world and you realize that you don't quite have that place yet. So I feel like this story is more about Grace Porter than it is about the sapphic romance. But I liked the angle that they approached it in, and I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars because to me, like, I really connected with the character. And I know like that there's been a lot of like mixed kind of like feedback from like this. Some people really loved it, some people like were not so okay with it. And I think it was because like how it was marketed was more for the sapphic romance. So I think that was a major like hurdle for like a lot of people, because like they didn't get what they had expected to get out of it. The next book that I read in the month of February is The Asshole Pandemic, a field guide to IDing, deleting, and healing from toxic relationships by A.C. Koch. This story is like really good, kind of a crash course like for people like that want to learn like how to identify toxic relationships. You can never really go through and put all of the red flags like into one book. Like there's no way that you can do that. But I feel like this book does a really good job on kind of giving you like an introduction to what toxic relationships are, like toxic people like in your life, like the kind of verbiage like that they use, the kind of things that they do. And this book like talks like about like establishing boundaries and a lot of other things. It is considered a self-help book, but I read it and I did find like what I got from it very helpful. And there was some things like that I did know, so it was kind of a mixture of stuff that I did know versus stuff like that I didn't. And I did find it overall very helpful and kind of like a good approach, a good like starter to IDing like these kind of people like that are in your life. And I do feel like that is important. So I've kind of been like watching like TikTok off and on because like it is very important. And the author of this is actually a TikToker, and she does like a lot of self-help things, and she talks like about like a lot of toxicity and toxic relationships and narcissistic relationships and everything else. And I do feel like that's really important like to know about these things, because I feel like all of us have dealt with a narcissist or somebody who's toxic like in our lives at one point. And the ability to ID those people and know like that that's what's happening to us like when it's happening, I think is very important and very good for your mental health, because like it kind of makes you realize like that you are not the problem, and like that it's actually the other person like that's the problem. And just as a note, if you have to ask yourself if you're a narcissist, there's a big possibility that you are not a narcissist, because narcissists never ask themselves if they are actually narcissists. I did end up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars because I did think I did get something out of it, and I did feel like it was very insightful and helpful for what it was. So I have been listening to The Stand by Stephen King since last year. It took me 3 months to get through it because it's a 44-hour long audiobook. That was a hurdle. The main reason I decided to go through and start listening to it was because they did a series on CBS with Alexander Skarsgård and James Marsden, and I was really excited about it because I wanted to learn more about The Stand. I've always wanted to experience The Stand for myself because I know it's considered a classic, and I remember what really turned me on to The Stand was the old TV series with Molly Ringwald. There was a mini-series where each episode was an hour and a half and has Greg Kinnear and a few other really popular actors in it. Gary Sinise also is in that one. I used to, when I was a kid, I watched that mini-series so many times, and my favorite song in the opening was Don't Fear the Reaper. So absolutely loved it. Now as far as the book's concerned, versus the TV series, this new TV series, I felt like they changed a lot of things. A lot of things the original kept intact, but what they did really well, what I really loved about it was they took it one step further in the last episode, and it doesn't end where the book ends, and it doesn't end where the other miniseries ended. And I felt like that was such a great way to sum it up, because it gave, I don't want to say too much because it's spoilery, but it gave all the characters the ability to kind of rise above Randall Flagg, which is played by Alexander Skarsgård in this one. The book itself, to me, was long. And the thing about it is I could have probably read one of the abridged copies, but the fact of it is that I felt like the majority of the book was just character development and story development. And there's actually, I believe, if I remember, I think there was 4 or 5 parts, but the last part in it was the one where all the action is, and pretty much everything in the first few parts leading up to that last part was all set up. It took me so long to get through it. I just wasn't I was kind of what is going on with this? It was just a lot to take in, but I did enjoy it. I thought it was really good. Now, on a spectrum, I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Stephen King's It. I enjoyed that more, but I still really enjoyed The Stand in its own right, because it is considered a classic. There was a lot of very interesting conversations. It was a lot of food for thought, and I really enjoyed it. For those of you guys who do not know what The Stand is, it's pretty much, this is probably the worst book I probably could have picked for us being in the middle of a pandemic and everything else, because this book is actually about a man-made virus that kills almost 95% of the people on the planet. So I don't think that this is probably the best reading material for everything that's going on in our present time. But what can I say? I mean, they aired the series, and I was hoping I was reading it concurrently with the series. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars because, I mean, for what it was, it was still really enjoyable. It still had a lot of nostalgia for me because of the original series that I was watching, the original miniseries with Molly Ringwald. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. So the next books that I'm going to be talking about are the ones that I read in March. I know some of you guys are going to come for me on this next book, but I just, let me just go on by saying that I really enjoyed the first 3 in the series, and the novella was pretty good too. But this book was probably it was my favorite in some ways, and to me there was a lot of more things that I noticed about it that kind of made me cringe. So here we go. It's the Court of Silver Flames. Now, I want to go into saying that this is not from Feyre and Rhysand's perspective. This is actually from Nesta and Cassian's perspective. And Nesta, we really got as more of a side character in the first few books. I really enjoyed her, but in this book her character definitely resonated with me more, because this character this book did so well on focusing on her trauma and the reason why she's so angry all the time, and everything else. And I really appreciated that about this book, because when you get into fantasy type books, like, you don't always get the psychological or like the emotional aspect of a lot of the characters, and they don't like really focus like on that a ton. A little bit less than I would like, to be perfectly honest. And this, I thought, did a really good job of focusing on trauma while also balancing the world. But I mean, it really does help the fact that we have 3 books and a novella prior to this that helps us to flesh out the world. So because of that, I feel like this book was able to focus and have more time to focus on the character and Nesta's development with Cassian. So I was very pleased in that aspect. Now, being the fact that this is a paranormal romance with fairies, there is sex scenes, and they are very, they're pretty graphic, and like they're pretty intense, and I know like a lot of people, like I mean, some of the sex scenes like were really, really well laid out. But some of the other like ones, like, this book did this thing where it says, oh, well, last night, like, they just kind of threw in, like, you know, like, kind of some graphic details about something that her and Cassian were doing sexually, like, the night before. And that really irritated me, because it's like, okay, so to me, that felt like things were just getting thrown in there for the simple fact that they wanted more sexual content in it. And I mean, if you're here for like the thirst and that's something that you enjoy, this will probably be you'll probably rate this a lot higher than I did in that regard. But it really bugged me, because it just, some of the sex scenes like were just so cringy, and I felt like sometimes like they over sexualized some of the situations. I didn't like, you know, the whole like reminiscing thing like very much, like, and it wouldn't have bothered me like if it was just like a couple times, but it seemed like it happened a lot in this book. So I ended up rating this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, because I really loved like the angle that they approached like this in. I really loved the trauma, but like the sex stuff, which is like, you know, part of like why you read like these books, you know, like the fairy like, you know, paranormal romance stuff, like it was just, some of it was just super cringy to me. And yeah, you know, I feel like the more I read, the more I notice like these things. And I definitely like noticed like that about this book. So I don't know like if I'm alone in like how I felt about this, but I know a lot of people love this, so please don't come for me, because I did like it. The sex scenes like for me like were super cringy, some of them. Like I said, I did prefer like when like they were like at the present moment and like not the flashbacks, because the flashbacks just didn't do it for me. So the second book that I read for the month of March is The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I actually listened to that on audiobook. I rebought this book for audio because I really wanted to sit down and re-listen to everything that was happening with my characters, Linus, Baker, Arthur Parnassus, the kids at the orphanage. For all of you guys that don't know and haven't been on this channel for a long time, I am obsessed with House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I think this book is like the epitome of like security and warm hug and acceptance, like doesn't matter how different you are. And this is still a 5-star book for me. I have not had a lot of 5-star reads like this year, so I really needed a pick-me-up. This was a reread in audiobook form, and I actually really did enjoy the audiobook. I thought the person like that narrated the audiobook did a really, really good job. But even no matter what format like you decide to consume this in, it's still a really great book. This, for those of you that don't know, this book is about Linus, and he's kind of a social worker, and he's a social worker for magical youth, and he goes from place to place to see if the homes like these kids are in are safe and secure and being run appropriately. He's always done like down to the letter. He does exactly what he's supposed to do. And so one day extremely upper management contacts him and says, we need you to go to this place that is a level 4, which is the top security clearance, and we need you to stay there for a month and kind of like find out what is happening, because we don't really know much. So he gets there, and some of the kids, like pretty much all the kids, are extremely shocking to him, because like there's some kids like there that he never thought he would get a chance to meet or had little inclination. He actually passed out when he found out like about one of the kids, but I don't want to say anything because that's a spoiler to me, because part of the magic of this book is just the discovery. But oh my god, like this book is just it's still one of my favorite books of all time, and I definitely think that if you have not picked it up yet, you need to. Book number 3 that I read in the month of March is Stitch Manga Volume 1. Now, if you guys don't know, I'm a huge Lilo and Stitch fan. I absolutely love Lilo and Stitch. But this, for me, was not good. Especially, like, I think it's because, like, I have been so hardcore, like, in the fandom, like, for the original fandom, like, where Stitch meets Lilo and him are both very, like, matched in the fact that they're both mismatched, like, for the rest of the world. And they really resonate with each other. But this book is half in Japan, and it's really weird because, like, this book starts off, like, with him, instead of crash landing in Hawaii, he crash lands in Japan. But what really messes me up is because, like, halfway through the book, we switch back to him being in Hawaii without any, like, continuity of, like, how that happens, like, how, like, there's a Stitch over here in Japan, and then there's a Stitch over here in Hawaii, and the girl he meets in Japan, she was a good character, but I don't feel like she complimented him the way Lilo did. Like, she wasn't one of those people that didn't fit in. Like, she did fit in, and he was just kind of a troublemaker, like, when you're, like, over there. And for me, like, I don't know, for me, like, it was kind of like, I think it was maybe more of a, like, a shock that he was so radically different, like, in that domain than he was over in this domain. And I know, like, it serves two completely different audiences, so I am sympathetic to that. But for me, being as big of a Lilo and Stitch fan as I am, this was not for me. Like, and I know, like, that this is also, like, with the understanding, like, that they say for all ages, and maybe, like, I'm not even, like, in the age bracket, like, for this, but I ended up giving this a 2 out of 5 stars because to me, like, I was really hyped for it, and I just felt like it was a major disappointment, like, on so many different levels, because Stitch and Lilo are like peanut butter and jelly. Like, you really have to have one for the other because, like, they're best friends. They're both, like, they both don't fit in anywhere else but with each other. Like, they're each other's ohana. And Stitch was talking about, like, ohana, like, when he was in the Japan area, and it didn't, to me, like, it didn't have, like, the same emotional feel that it did when he was in Hawaii, like, where he was actually matched, like, with somebody who was just as much of a misfit as he was. So that's my take, but sorry guys, just had to change my battery really quick. So book number 4 that I read in March is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I read Strange the Dreamer a couple years ago and really enjoyed it. Anytime Laini Taylor gets her hands on anything, it is, like, art, and it's, like, completely, like, a transformative, like, completely different, like, setting, and it just really transports you, like, to something, like, completely, like, different, like, that you never knew you needed until you were in the middle of it. This is a story that there's a lot to it. I'm gonna do, like, the best I can. March was actually the first month, like, where we are doing a read-along for the entire trilogy. So this month that we're currently in, which is April, we're reading Blood and Starlight, and then in next month we're gonna be reading Gods and Monsters, which is the final book in May. So this was my first taste of Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and I have to be honest, like, at first, like, I wasn't, like, really sure, like, what to expect when I got into this, because you have Caro, who is this art student, and she's got blue hair, but, like, she's kind of, like, living a dual life. She's going to art school, trying to become an artist, but then she also gets recruited by this person, like, that she grew up around named Brimstone, and she has to go through a doorway to get to his place, which kind of acts as a portal, and she ends up all over the world, and she has to be able to speak all of these languages to communicate, and she collects teeth. And I don't, like, want to go, like, into what the teeth are used for because that's a spoiler, and you do find out later on in the first book what those teeth are used for. But the tagline for, like, this is when an angel and a demon fall in love, and kind of, like, everything, like, it's like a lot of mayhem, because demons and angels are not supposed to fall in love. Like, it's just not supposed to happen. This story was so beautiful. Like, I really appreciate, like, the story. I appreciate the development. I really liked Karu, and the story does not end where you think it's going to end. And it was very surprising and very magical, and it does start out very slow, and at the beginning, like, I kind of had, like, a little bit of trouble getting into the story, but once I was into the story, it was magical, like, and I flew through it after that. I ended up rating this a 4.5 out of 5 stars because it was just so good. It was really amazing. And I really like the main character, I like the side characters, I like where the story was headed, and I'm really excited to continue on like with the second book because I just think it's just gonna be amazing also. And I've already started it, so, and I've enjoyed what I've read so far, so definitely think that if you enjoy like something like a little bit of taste of something different, that you would enjoy this, especially because every time Lanny touches something, it is like art. Like her worlds and her construction and her world building, everything is just art. So the last book that I read for the month of March is the Lux series Opposition. This has the last book in the series and the prequel, which is Shadows. Like to me, like I felt like 5 books, you know, it was interesting. The battle scene like at the end like was so short. Like we took so long to like work up to the battle scene in this, and you know, I enjoyed like the alien aspect. Like I liked the science fiction, I love the relationship, I love where it ended up, but it took me like a long time. I think like what really like made this book for me was Shadows. Shadows is a prequel like where we follow Damon's twin brother Dawson and his interest in a human girl named Bethany, and of course like, you know, like that more forbidden love. But I really liked it because like it helped me to get to know Dawson better. Like Dawson, you kind of like see him as a side character like throughout everything, and you don't like really like know like how things happened or how he ended up where he ended up like in the series. But I really enjoyed this. Like didn't enjoy it as much as like I probably like enjoyed like the 4th book in the series because of the 3.5 stars, but I loved Shadows. I thought this was really awesome, like that I got a glimpse of Dawson. So I ended up rating this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And my battery's dying again. So that is everything that I read in February and March, and I'm going to be hopefully doing more videos for you guys very soon. So thank you guys for everybody that has stuck with me, and if you guys like this video, hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon if you guys want to receive emails every time I post. I am also on Instagram, Twitter, Amazon, and Goodreads. Those links are linked in the description below, and I hope to see you guys again really soon.